Hey everybody, welcome back to Tenza Motorsports. Today we're going to be doing some ECS tuning replacement brakes for our F25 X3. This is a 2014. This is actually my parents' vehicle, and we're going to be going through and talking about why you should be doing this yourself and how expensive it is to have the dealership do it. But before we get into that, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, like if you enjoy this type of content. Also make sure to be following us on Instagram, Tenza_Motorsports, where we do giveaways. All you have to do to be part of those giveaways is be following us. I pull the winners from our following list. These right here were purchased through ECS Tuning. I'll have the link to everything that you see here down in the description below. This really is not that difficult of a job, kind of a behind the scenes. All this is empty because I've actually unboxed this already and we've done the other side. I tend to do that in a lot of these videos so that when I go to do the side that I'm showing you guys, I already know roughly what's going on. So we'll get into that in just a moment because the rear is a little bit more complicated than just slapping on the rotors and pads. Real quick though, I want to talk about how expensive it is through BMW to do this. So I have an estimate here. This car recently had its oil changed. We do still take the car to BMW to get the oil changed because of their inspections. So by the time you replace the oil and get an inspection done, it actually ends up being slightly cheaper than doing the oil yourself and then taking the car in and getting an inspection separately. So that's why the car still goes there. And then, like I said, they'll go through the whole car, and they told us our brakes are getting low. This is really just a service estimate for the rear brakes and then a couple other little things here, but I just want to talk about the rear brakes. They quoted us $483 to do the rear brakes. It's not terrible, but we purchased all of this for right around that same price. So you can do all four corners, sensors, pads, rotors. This came with rotor screws, grease, everything you need to do a brake job for basically the same price as having them do just the rear. So literally half, if not a little bit more, because the fronts normally end up being slightly more expensive than the rears. So dealerships, sometimes they come out okay. In this case, we're definitely going to be tackling this ourselves. We're going to start here in the front. The front really is very simple. Special tools that you might need that I would see somebody not having. You're going to need a T40 and T45 torque bit. And I know the torques anymore nowadays aren't really considered special tools, but when you start getting up closer to the T45s, some toolkits don't have that. And then if you've got one, a caliper compressor, we're just going to be using basically like a woodworking hand vise or a woodworking clamp. That works just fine. You can also do it with a pair of pliers. The rears, you can almost do, I think you can actually do the rears by hand, funny enough, and we'll go over that in just a moment. Other than that, everything else is going to be pretty standard stuff. So let's go through, we're going to pull the front tire off and I'll walk you through how to do the brakes. All right, so we're going to remove the wheel here. This is a 17 millimeter. We'll just remove these 5 lugs. Now the car is going to have 2 sensors. I think they're all driver front, passenger rear. If they're not, this doesn't change how you replace them. All we'll be doing is tracing this up and then putting the new sensor right back in its old place. So to remove this, we're going to use a 16 millimeter box end wrench here. And all I do is I will slip this on there and then I will use a mallet to loosen it up. And the same thing on the bottom, there's 2 of these. And then we'll be pulling those bolts out. Okay, once the caliper is unbolted, you want to use, well, it doesn't really matter what you use as long as you're not letting it hang on its own brake lines. I'm going to be pulling it up here and I've just got a little bungee cord here. And so we'll just loop it through here and have it hold onto the caliper. Next, we're going to be removing the rotor itself. This, I actually use a T40 to remove this. I've learned over the years that if you use an Allen, it almost strips immediately. No matter how good your screw is here, no matter how new or clean it is, it seems that the Allens like to strip out. So I always start with a Torx T40. If this does strip out, I have a video showing how to fix that. I'll have that linked up here. Now the old rotor's out of the way, because there's just a little bit more room to play with the caliper here. So we want to get this clip off. You can do this by pushing down and towards us. We'll remove this outer brake pad. And then the inner one will just pull straight towards us. Now we have our brake pad sensor hanging on here. I just forgot about that. So I don't know if you can see inside there. There's the sensor right there. So all I'm gonna do is take the flat blade. I'm just gonna pry this out. You can save these sensors. I always recommend just replacing them, but there's nothing wrong with the one that I just removed. And then we'll just put the sensor to the side for right now, and we'll be replacing that later. From here, you can actually just pull this whole caliper bracket towards you. And I've got the bungee cord hanging on that, so I'm gonna move this to a different location here real quick. This is a part that we'll wanna grease when we go to put everything back together. These right here. So that just slides out. Once we have the caliper all by itself, we're actually gonna be compressing here. So if you've got a compressing tool, you'll put it against this and it'll squeeze in. In our case, we're gonna be going this direction. You can use a pair of pliers if you've got a big enough pair of pliers, but I just like to use this. It's not difficult to do. And there we go. Once the caliper is maxed out, now we can start reassembly. So I'm gonna grease these up before we reinstall. The kit did come with these, which is really nice, but make sure you use them. A lot of people overlook these. So you wanna grease up a few areas, because if you don't, you can get the brakes to squeak. Here's the old pads. Here's the new ones. The old ones weren't completely gone. Probably had close to 60,000 miles on these pads and rotors, and so it was time to go. Like I said earlier, we hadn't actually hit our brake pad sensor, but you should be replacing your brakes around the time that it's starting to hit them. In the back, when we did the brake pad sensor on the passenger side, we had just barely started to touch that sensor. So you'll slide the new pads onto the inside. This pad goes on the outside. And you can do all this before putting the new sensor on, because we'll just reach around the back here, put the new sensor in from there, in your caliper clip. New rotor screw. That also came with the kit. And then you can actually get these to be a little off-centered, so you want to make sure you're being careful about where you tighten it down. There we go, that looks like it works. Then we'll just slide this right over top of your new rotor. Now we're gonna trace this brake pad sensor and get that replaced. So I've traced the wire, goes up, and then right behind the splash shield, you can take a 10mm and just remove a couple of these here to get back behind the splash shield. It's gonna be kind of hard to see, but there is the box. And so this cable right here, we'll come over here and we'll pop the box open. This lower one, it's the gray connector. We'll disconnect that and then rerun the new wire. Here's the new line. I made sure to put it right back where the old one came out of. If you come all the way down to here, to the brake caliper itself, just come down over here. You want to make sure that the side with the little nub is the side facing the brake pad. So it'll go in like this, facing you. All I'm going to do is lock it into the side of the brake pad. Putting the wheel back on, torquing that down, and then going over to the rear. So here is the rear. We've already gone and taken the wheel off, just like the front, taken the rotor, the caliper, same thing, those two bolts. Now we're going to get to where it is slightly different. This one the caliper bracket doesn't just slide out. You see there's a bolt there, and then there is a nut. That is a 13, and this right here is a 15, and you'll break that loose. Before we take the caliper bracket off all the way, I'm actually gonna loosen up these two right here. There's this one here, and there's one on the other side. You can see it right there. Those are T30s. The reason for that is once you get the caliper bracket off, it's hard to, like I'm gonna put this back right here and just put one bolt just through enough that it'll hold it so I can get those off. Once you remove the caliper bracket, then the caliper is on its own and it's hard to get those two bolts removed. Once you got that bracket off, this whole back piece comes off. And then this is where you'll need that T45. So we're gonna screw this in clockwise, so basically tightening it. And what that's doing is there is a piece in here that as you use the e-brake and your brake pads start to wear out, it actually pushes this down and you have to reset it. And then it stops. Then from here, all you do is push this back in. Oh, you can do it by hand, but it's pretty tough. So I just moved it a little bit right there, but well, there's a majority of it done by hand. So you can do it by hand if you need to, but we're just going to use our little vise here again. There we go, push it in the rest of the way. And then from here, we're all just reassembly. So there you go. It's about a 3 to 4 hour job if you have all the tools and you've done brakes in the past. I didn't want to bore you with, step by step on the rear. We showed you the important parts. Yeah, that rear e-brake, you got to make sure you pull that off or you'll never get that caliper to compress enough to put new pads in there. So I appreciate everybody so much for watching. Any comments or questions down in the comment section below. Again, everything we use today will be linked in the description. Big thanks to ECS Tuning. Fantastic stuff. This again saved us $500, $600, $700 fairly easily taking it to a dealership. And I recommend if you have a car like this is basically the only way to own them once they start getting this old, is to work on them yourself. I really appreciate everybody so much for watching. Again, there are more videos of this car on the channel, so make sure to check those out and we'll see everybody in the next video.
Bam!